By 2032, ACT will empower 20.2 million more learners to exit high school ready for post-secondary and work opportunities. We will concentrate our work around 5 strategic pillars: build, inform, connect, mobilize, and partner. We are collaborating with key stakeholders to bring this bold new vision to life. We've got our work cut out for us, and with your support moving forward, we will make it happen.
Hi friends, Angelica Vanetta, co-chair of Inclusive ICR. We are a coalition of over 220 employers in Eastern Iowa, all working together to grow the diversity and inclusion of our workforce, to create a space where employees feel a sense of belonging, included, and valued. Inclusive ICR is a proud sponsor of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion track of the Iowa Ideas Conference. As you participate today, be sure to connect with other Inclusive ICR champions, as we'd love to share information with you about our upcoming coalition meetings, projects, and how our work is impacting positive social change in our region. Be sure to visit our website at inclusiveiowa.org for information on upcoming events and to sign up for our e-newsletter. Thank you and have a great conference.
Good morning. Welcome to the session, Housing for All of the Iowa Ideas Conference. I am your moderator this morning. My name is Stephanie Munsterman. I'm she, her, and I'm the Executive Director of the Cedar Rapids Civil Rights Commission. This session is within the track of diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as the human and social services. We would like to thank Inclusive ICR and Cedar Rapids Bank and Trust for sponsoring this session. So thank you for supporting diversity, equity, inclusion. This session, we will be discussing housing. Across Iowa, we see a shortage of affordable and available homes, and many households are already severely cost burdened, spending more than half of their income on housing. We know that quality homes and rental, as well as to purchase, are expensive and scarce, while our wages do not increase. They remain the same. And so for many, there's no margin of error. If you miss one paycheck or have an unexpected expense, you're away from losing your home. Many people are on that brink. But not only does this impact individuals, it does also impact the community. It impacts local businesses. Local businesses have expressed concerns that due to the lack of housing, they might lose the ability to recruit and retain top talent. So we are all concerned about access to housing. And during this time together this morning, we'll include a discussion about the challenges and the resources relating to renting, buying, and maintaining a home. So as the audience, you are invited to share your perspectives and questions with the panelists, and those will be sent on. All sessions do have closed captioning, which has been enabled, and all the sessions are also being recorded. So now to the interesting part, the panelists. I'll introduce them. On our panel today, we have Denise Buller, she, her. She is the Senior Financial Wellness Counselor with Horizons. She has been with Financial Wellness Center for since 2016, and she earned her HUD Housing Counseling Certification in 2019. Prior to Horizons, she was 27 years as a financial analyst in finance. And then we have Carrie Wardeman, she, her, the Executive Director of Home Inc. Carrie comes with more than 16 years of experience in property management, real estate development, as well as community engagement. Home Inc. is Des Moines' oldest private nonprofit around housing, and they meet people with where they are on their housing journey to support them on their way. Then we have John Biederman. He, him, he is the assistant manager of Cedar Rapids Legal Aid as an attorney and the manager of the Linn County Eviction Help Desk. He works to help tenants avoid eviction and avoid adding that to their record, which makes finding housing even more difficult. So a question for the audience, I always like to get people's thoughts too. To start off, I invite participants to share in the chat or share in the Q&A. What is the first word that comes to mind when you think about housing access? So just be thinking about that. What are things that come to mind? And so now I would like for each of the panelists, from Denise, Carrie, and John, please, if you could, share your perspective on housing for all. What does this mean? How does housing for all relate to your work?
Okay, I'll go first. So for me, housing for all, it's decent, sustainable. I used to say affordable. HUD's definition of affordable rent is 30% of gross income. And we're seeing that that's a little more, it's becoming more and more difficult for people to find housing at that level. So I say sustainable now, and it's safe. So having the housing, and that housing, whether it's rental, it's home ownership, or it's even temporary housing until, we can find them permanent housing.
Thank you, Denise. Carrie?
I think Denise said it perfectly. The only thing that I would add is choice in housing, that everyone has a choice in which option, which location, what housing is best. That's all of those criteria that Denise outlined, but that is also the best location and choice for their family.
Absolutely. That's a big piece of it, and oftentimes lacking based upon what's available and people's income. John, what are your thoughts?
I guess from my perspective and what I do at our eviction help desk, my goal is kind of just to simply keep people housed, is to keep them from being homeless, keep them from couch surfing on the streets, and preferably in something that is safe and habitable.
Thank you. So Denise, we'll start off. I have a question for you. Could you share where you see in your line of work with Horizons, where do you see the most people struggling around this, around housing?
So good question. Most of my work that I'm doing right now is really pre-purchase. I'm working with those new homeowners, and I'm also working on the other end, the foreclosure prevention. So for new home buyers, what I'm seeing, market rates are up. We know that housing rates are up, interest rates are up. So that brings down their purchasing power. And so it's difficult to find affordable housing. There's also a shortage, so it's really a seller's market right now. So it's hard for those buyers to be able to find, the home that they're looking for. On the rental issue, as the market goes up, the rates, rents are going up, but we're also seeing cost of living. So food, insurance, all of those are going up, but we're not seeing incomes go up. And so we just are really seeing all of our renters and homeowners struggling. And, we say a lot of them are paycheck to paycheck. And as one bump in the road can just totally destroy their housing dreams.
Most definitely. It's not just the housing, it's almost like every sphere in our life. We're seeing some, increases in all kinds of costs, and especially, even if you're dual income, if you are a single income, being a single parent or a single individual, having that one income, and like you said, you're one paycheck away from potentially losing your housing. And that housing instability is really, it's just terrifying.
Well, and if there's any change of family dynamics, so now if all of a sudden we're a 2 income and we're going to a 1 income, whether that is, the partnership dissolves, or a health crisis or loss of employment, and it just causes, that much more crisis in a home that's already struggling.
Absolutely. And it's a good point about health crises, because not everybody has access to resources and benefits. I had some of my own health issues this year, but where I work for the Cedar Rapids Civil Rights Commission, I do have paid time off, so I can take time, as other folks aren't able to do that, and you're really at a loss for what to do. So Carrie, we already know that housing access is a very complex issue. There's so many things that are connected to it. Would you mind talking us through some of the issues that you have seen that have led to some of the affordability issues and concerns that we're seeing.
Yep, absolutely. I think, you hear a lot about supply being an issue, and it certainly is. Rents go up because there is a limited supply. For sale home purchase prices go up because there's a limited supply. And we're in a really challenging situation right now in that in order to add to our supply is extremely costly. So, COVID really disrupted the supply chain. And while some materials prices have come down some, they're significantly, dollar for dollar inflated over what they were pre-COVID. The interest rate environment then just compounds that situation. And so it's really, really challenging to bring new supply online at a price that is affordable. We look at market rents and we look at existing homes for sale, and the pricing is really, it is in line with what we can build that same product for. So we have to find other ways to address that supply challenge in order to overcome that.
So many things included in that piece. John, I would like to move to you around evictions. What are some situations that you see that do lead up to an eviction? And then to follow up on that, can you perhaps walk us through the impacts of an eviction, or even having an eviction that was not done, but still on your record? Just walk us through that.
Sure. I guess the situations that lead to an eviction, I would say the two most common things that I encounter would be non-payment of rent, and then also what we would call like a holdover tenant. So non-payment of rent is you haven't paid your rent within the date on your lease, and then your landlord serves you with a notice saying you've got to pay this within a certain amount of time, and if you don't do that, then they can file an eviction action against you. As Denise said, a lot of folks are paycheck to paycheck, and if you have any interruption in your cash flow, having the ability to pay rent on time is very, very difficult. And typically a person has 3 days to cure that default. And if they don't cure within that 3 days, the landlord can then proceed with an eviction. I think there's a common misconception that there is quick and available assistance for people. And while our local agencies certainly do the best they can with what they have, it's not a overnight process. And so that 3 days moves very quickly. With respect to holdover tenancies, that's something that we see a lot of, and that's when a landlord terminates a lease. A lot of people live on month-to-month leases, and a landlord or a tenant can terminate those within, by giving a 30-day notice. And if you're unable to move within kind of that 30-day time frame, a landlord can then try and remove you by an eviction action. And the cost of entry to move is very high. Oftentimes landlords require the equivalent of 2 months rent for deposit and then the first month's rent. And if you are living paycheck to paycheck, the ability to save up for that move is very, very difficult. The impacts of an eviction are significant. As you mentioned, it can, if you are evicted, you're removed from your home. That can affect your employment. If you have children, I can't imagine the effect that would have on them. The trauma that would create for them, as well as just being able to not go to school, potentially being moved out of your school district. So the effects are very significant. And even if a person has an eviction action filed against them and they successfully defend it, that eviction is still on the record, and that it shows that it was filed. If a landlord looks up their name in Iowa courts, they'll see that was filed. And I think that alone creates barriers to future housing.
We do see, thank you for sharing that. And it's hard to understand or put yourself in those shoes of someone who has been through that, just how disruptive it is, and the impacts to, if you have children, the impacts to even getting a job. If you don't have a home, what's your home base for applications? So it gets really challenging. We also know that nationally, home ownership rates show a large and growing gap by race and ethnicity, where in Iowa, we see about 72% of white household-owned homes in 2018 were 48% of Latinx households. But then we look, it's 42% of Black households. In Iowa itself, actually, that was nation's number. In Iowa, it's even more stark, with 76% of white owning and only 26% of Black households owning homes. Notably, the current home ownership rates for households of Black individuals is even lower than it was when the fair housing laws were passed in 1968. So we have not moved the needle where we should. We're seeing backtracks for individuals who face other impacts. Denise, this be a question for, for all of you across the board. What are some ways you think that we could start to close some of those home ownership gaps around racial and ethnicities?
Education. I mean, I think that is one of the first things. A lot of individuals' families have never owned in the past. They don't know the steps to homeownership. They don't think they can ever own. The old adage, you no longer have to have a 20% down payment. I mean, there are options out there. There are assistance, statewide. Iowa Finance Authority, IFA, has first-time home buyer programs. Different communities. Cedar Rapids, we have, at the first of every year, there's funding that comes in to help some households. City of Iowa City right now has partnered with a couple of lenders, and they have assistance. So there's assistance out there, but these potential homeowners don't, know about it. And so helping them connect to HUD Housing Counseling Agency and getting that education before they start searching and learn what are the steps, that is a big step for me.
Thank you. Carrie, would you share your thoughts on this question from your perspective?
Absolutely. So I second Denise's education sentiments 100%. And to expand on that assistance, I think that there are, like Denise mentioned, there are programs out there that are specifically targeting underserved populations with targeted down payment assistance, for example. So we work with a lot of clients who purchase our homes, they're all low to moderate income households, and a lot of them are able within targeted neighborhoods, if they are of a minority population, are able to access additional down payment assistance for that home. So expansion of those types of programs to sort of level the playing field. I think part of that education also is for us who work in the housing realm to really learn what we need to address from a cultural standpoint to reach everyone. I think that there are, we have identified here at Home Inc. that there are certain groups of people that we're not serving in proportion to the population in our area. And, digging in, it may be that we're not reaching people in the right places. Do we need to go to their houses of worship? Do we need to go to, other community resources where they can find people that where we can connect with people that they trust, so that they know that the educational counseling services that we're able to provide are safe and it's not a scam. If you're in a situation where you've always been scrapping to just get by and someone comes and says, look, we're going to offer you $15,000 in down payment assistance and you can buy a home, it sounds like a scam. So, we need to be able to reach people in a way that they know that this is a legitimate process and that they can trust it. And then the other thing that I would add is time. If you are in a situation where you're working multiple jobs and trying to deal with daycare and just trying to get through life, there isn't a whole lot of time to explore homeowner education. So we need to support people with, at those courses, when we're doing counseling and education, can we provide childcare? Can we help with transportation and fill in those other gaps that eat away at the time that is available for people to really learn and grow about what resources they can access?
Such a good point, talking about the gap of folks who are being served and going to where they are. We've seen similar things at the Civil Rights Commission where we have people that we're serving, but we know discrimination happens. How do we build that trust? It's how do we inform people of their rights, of their resources, but also have them trust us as an agency to do the right thing. That also takes time, and it's very challenging, and it's understandable. A lot of folks have been through from discrimination systemically as well as individual. And so, John, that leads into my question for you about the impact of housing instability from your perspective. With the intersectionality of all of our identities, of all of who we are, have you seen the impacts vary across age or gender, race or disability? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I think housing instability impacts our vulnerable populations much more significantly. I think me as a cisgender white man, it's much easier for me to navigate the rental market, or it would be if I was renting, than if I was a member of a protected community. And that's clear in the work that I do. The folks that I see come through our eviction help desk. I don't have the specific breakdown as far as percentages or anything like that, but it's just very, very obvious with what I've observed. And I think one thing that's maybe left out or not talked about as much is just the effect that it has on disabled and elderly people. I know the majority of people who receive like Section 8 housing vouchers, is the majority of them are either disabled or non-disabled elderly. And I heard just on Tuesday, we had a discussion with some folks from the Section 8 office that here in our area, the number of vouchers over the last 50 years has only increased by 10. So if we think about how much our population has grown and how much the cost of housing has grown, but only 10 new vouchers over 50 years, and if the majority of those are going to elderly people and disabled people, that is a big chunk of our population that is being underserved, I think.
Such a good point about the no increase in vouchers. And then even if vouchers are increased, not all property management companies or landlords will accept Section 8 vouchers. And so that really can limit where people who do have those vouchers can live. And going back to the point that Carrie made about choice, and sometimes we see pockets of people who are on Section 8 within a certain part of a city because those are the only landlords who accept it. And a lot of times around those pieces, you see, food deserts and other issues around that. John, looks like you're about to say
Well, yeah,
something.
I was just saying, we talk about in our area, the vacancy rate is so small and so tight. And then if you were to even constrict that further with the available places that accept vouchers, having the ability and freedom of movement and choice, it's really difficult for people.
Well, and if I can interject here, sorry, but I mean, in the Gazette on October 10th, there was an article where Shelter House had done the point in time count. After the encampment fire they had down there, they found 13 people that have vouchers, but they can't find housing, and so they're on the street. And it goes back to now that there's the new state law that landlords don't have to accept the voucher.
Right. We have seen this is a nationwide issue around housing scarcity and access, and we're seeing it impacting Cedar Rapids and Iowa pretty significantly. I know here I am in Cedar Rapids, and it's easily quadrupled in numbers on people who are experiencing homelessness, and there's there's lack of funding in some ways. There's lack of resources. There like you said, Denise, landlords, because of a law that was signed into existence in 2022, we don't have to, landlords can say no to taking Section 8 easily. And that really, again, limits access for people. And so,
Stephanie, can I jump in on that real quick?
Yes, please do.
I was going to say, I think part of that, we've been talking a lot about education for renters and for prospective home buyers, I think that I tie some of that in unwillingness to accept Section 8 vouchers. I tie some of that back to education as well. I think that if we could be better about educating landlords about what that program is, what it looks like, and what still the rights and responsibilities that they aren't giving away when they accept a Section 8 voucher, I think we may have an opportunity to invite more landlords to willingly participate in the program. So I think just circling back to the education component, I really think that ties into that piece as well.
And I think there's to dovetail on that, there's a misunderstanding that a lot of people who receive Section 8 are coming in from other communities, other states, and statistically, that's just not accurate. There's obviously some element to that just because people move, but it's not this overwhelming percentage of our voucher holders that are coming from other communities. It's just not. So,
right. When you look at the the actual numbers, it doesn't quite fit the anecdotal stories that perhaps people talk about when it comes to housing access and Section 8 vouchers. And I agree with you 100% about increased education, Carrie, to pull folks to understand the process, to understand, the rights and responsibilities of landlords and tenants. Both sides need to have more clarity in the processes, more clarity in the program. As
Yes.
we're talking about that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, yes, exactly. I mean, to build on that, speaking from experience, the perspective of a landlord, that packet, that Section 8 packet in and of itself, that the tenant brings into the office, that's an overwhelming and scary packet to fill out. And, the case managers at Section 8 are overworked and overwhelmed and have too big of a caseload to be able to really take the time to walk someone through how to fill out that packet. So even just that bare minimum, understanding of this big, scary governmental process of accepting Section 8 is just a tiny little piece of it.
We have a question from the audience that's related to this, asking, what do you think about the dismantling of public housing rather than the vouchers? This dismantling of public housing, do we see public housing having a positive role again in the future?
This ties into it. This ties into this question a little bit. I think that something that could really play a role is the concept of community land trusts and preserving public housing. Public housing is really, really important, but there are limitations, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, depending on the program. That's not a lifetime. So there are limitations on the affordability period. And so I know here in Des Moines, there was actually just a stakeholder meeting yesterday afternoon. There is an initiative to begin a community land trust to find a way to preserve affordability and perpetuity and really make good use of these dollars that are being invested into affordable housing. So, there's a limited number of low-income housing tax credit dollars, a limited number of home dollars, a limited number of all of the various housing funds. And so when we build these projects, if we can have assurance that they will be from the rental standpoint, but also the homeownership standpoint on the community land trust, if we have some assurance that they'll be affordable in perpetuity, then we're not just using those limited dollars to sort of try to tread water, but maybe the annual allocation of funds can actually make some progress in this arena, because what we're building today, we know will be affordable forever.
Thank you, Carrie. That's, again, housing is such a complex issue. There's not one solution. There's not one quick fix. There's not even just one long fix. So I would like to know, we're talking about this and people are attending this session, but why is this topic so important right now to this audience? And what are some long-term consequences if we continue or if we ignore the issue around access for housing? Carrie, I will start with you. Just your thoughts on that.
Yep. Twofold. I think, we do have a housing shortage here. We do have a significant and growing unhoused population, but we are not in as dire of a situation as some other parts of the country are. So it's really important now. It's really timely now that we work to address the affordability gap before it becomes even worse. And then the other piece of why is this important now? We are struggling to sustain our communities by fulfilling all of the employment opportunities that exist as it is. So without stable, safe housing options for everyone, our it impacts every single one of us. Our communities cannot grow, they cannot thrive, and we will stall. So it's really an important issue for everybody.
Thank you. John, if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts, if we continue or if we do ignore this topic, and why is this important?
Well, I think it will just drastically change the kind of the landscape of our communities. I think we'll have much less diverse cities, we'll have much less diverse communities. I think people will segregate, and there'll be pockets of people who are doing really well and people who aren't. And I think that's a really unfortunate thing. And I don't think anyone, listening to this wants that. As far as like this exact moment in time, it's going to be very cold very soon, and it's dangerous to be out on the street. It's dangerous not to have stable and safe housing. And so I think as our climate can, as it gets more extreme, we're going to have colder temperatures in the winter and potentially much hotter temperatures in the summer. If people don't have safe places to go, I think there's going to be really negative health impacts for people.
So, a lot of the talk we've had so far, there's some huge challenges and there's some drastic and explicit concerns. I would like to talk a little bit about some solutions, potential solutions and resources, but understanding again that it's not a one and done. It's a constant need to evaluate and ensure these programs and resources are actually helping the people in need. So Denise, if you wouldn't mind sharing from your perspective, resources available for someone who is hoping to purchase a home.
And there are a lot of resources out there. Unfortunately, our community just isn't aware of those. So as I said earlier, Iowa Finance Authority has first-time homebuyer programs. A lot of our lenders are recognizing the gap. And so they have set aside funding to help those low to moderate income, or peoples of color, especially trying to help them to increase the, the homeownership in those communities. There's, but finding those resources. And again, Carrie and I both are with, housing counseling agencies. We can help those individuals find those resources. So reaching out to us, first to help, making sure you're ready for homeownership. What does homeownership involve? Where can we, help you find those resources? So there are resources out there. We just need to help you get connected.
And when we're talking too about, purchasing a home, there are some people who've never owned a home, and so are not maybe familiar how to maintain a home. Are any of you familiar with information other than like a Google search, how to maintain my home, of resources of, those first-time buyers that get in that first week and they're like, oh, I'm supposed to change a filter. Oh, I'm supposed to clean out my gutters. What resources are out there to educate folks on how to maintain a home once they're in it?
That's something that
go ahead, Carrie.
No, go ahead, Denise.
That is part of pre-purchase education is, so it's not just how to purchase, but we go through the whole process, and now you're a homeowner. What does that mean? What do you need to do? And then, for those homeowners that are struggling, something comes up and it's like, oh, I don't have the money. This just happened. There are resources out there to help homeowners then to maintain, and we can, help connect to that as well. So, different communities through the cities, city of Cedar Rapids has some funds set aside for people to help with the, obviously not large repairs, but emergency repairs. the city, the Council of Governments. I mean, there's money out there. It's just helping individuals find it and connect with it.
Yeah. Carrie or John, did you have?
I was really going to say pretty much exactly what Denise said. I think that the counseling support is just priceless in that, just as Denise said, the housing counselor is along for the journey. So it's not just great, got you in this home and now we're gonna wash our hands of helping you. That is a coach and a supporter who can continue to help you with all of those challenges moving forward. So just more people having access to resources like what we offer make a big difference.
The whole process of buying a home is such a intimidating process, especially if you're the first one in your family who has purchased a home. There's so many pieces, and it's not an easy process. There's appraisals, there's inspections, there's repairs, there's the loan, locking in your rates. So many pieces that if you've never done it before, it can be very overwhelming. And so that can also lead, as we're maintaining our home, John, we'll get to eviction in a moment, but I want to talk as a follow-up around, I'm kind of going through the process of purchasing, maintaining, but how about staving off a foreclosure? How does a family do that? How does an individual do that? What are some resources? And what are the impacts of that? So 12 questions in one for you, Denise.
Okay, that's a lot. Okay. Foreclosure. Yes, there is assistance available in the state. Again, going back to your housing counseling agencies, when those individuals start to fall behind, one of the notices that the lender sends out is please reach out to a housing counseling agency. And I know that can seem scary. A lot of individuals that I've met with, we thought we could pull this out on ourselves. So, if you're helping your friends and family, your community members understand if they're starting to struggle and they're, starting to fall behind or the potential of falling behind, reaching out to a counselor to understand what are your options. Here in Iowa, we have Iowa Mortgage Help, contacting them so Iowa Mortgage Help then will assign their case to one of 3 agencies in the state of Iowa. Horizons is one of those agencies. And just yesterday, I ran a quick report out of Iowa Mortgage Help just to see from January 1st through the end of September, Horizons alone had 268 foreclosure cases assigned to us. My numbers may be down a little bit because I did have to take a break. I was out for a while. That averages out to be 30 cases a month. That's calendar month. I mean, that's one family a day coming in crisis. So there are funds available to help individuals that had a COVID impact. That is through Iowa Finance Authority. Again, reaching out to Iowa Mortgage Help, we can get you connected to Iowa Legal Aid. If you're coming in through Iowa Mortgage Help, the income level is higher. They can, assist in households with a higher income. We can then review, the housing counselor can review the situation. Does this household potentially, qualify for housing assistance funds? We can then help get them. We can help them with that application, submit it for them, track it. We can work with their servicer. What are our options through the servicer? Help them filing a loss mitigation. Sometimes it's very scary for them to pick up the phone and talk to their lender. And sometimes they don't quite understand, the language may be a little different. They don't understand what does loss mitigation mean, and, all the paperwork, not understanding. I mean, I've had a lot of, households call me, the borrower calls me and says, I've submitted this package 15 times. That may be an exaggeration, but I've submitted this and they keep saying it's not complete. And it could be very simple as they did not have their loan number on every page of their bank statement. And so the lender won't accept it. And so helping them to understand what is needed to get a complete package. I mean, and that is at no cost to the borrower. I mean, our services, if they're in foreclosure, Iowa Legal Aid and that housing counselor is at no cost to them. So we're not adding to the burden.
Denise, I have a follow-up question for you.
Oops.
No, it's good.
Do you, work with folks who don't have a traditional mortgage facing foreclosure, but may have like a land contract or a purchase contract and are facing a contract forfeiture?
Most definitely. In fact, that is something that is very new. In the past, we have not been able to work with them, but that is now part of this HAF assistance through the Iowa HAF program. So it is a traditional mortgage. It is land contracts. It is even, having, which in the past, if they have a manufactured home and they have a loan on that, we can now assist with that. Or their lot rent. We can also, if they are behind on their homeowner's insurance, HAF will assist with that. Property taxes. So some of this has never been assistance that we've had before in the past, and now there is funding available, for those. I'm going to get on my soapbox. Can you tell I'm a little passionate about this? On my soapbox a little bit right now. Property taxes. Right now, HAF is having an issue. There are only, I think the last I heard was yesterday, there are only 44 counties, I believe, out of 99 that will participate in accepting these funds. So now we have individuals that could be losing their home over basically a very small tax bill on a $200,000 house because they don't have the funds. And that county, the county attorney, I'm going to call you out, guys, I'm going to call you out, are unwilling to accept the HAF funds. Okay, I'm done.
And that's why we asked you all to be on this panel, because not only are you experts in this information, you're all very dedicated to this housing for all. And so, John, I have a question around eviction. If somebody is facing that eviction, what can or what should they do?
I would say the very first thing they should do is probably call us. I think they should call legal aid immediately. There's no cost to them to call us, to do an intake, to do the screening process, and very likely there's no income limit because there's some funding that helps us with eviction diversion. So people should feel very comfortable to call us. We deal with this issue literally every single day. We did hundreds of eviction cases last year. We're very familiar with the issues, the defenses, and if there isn't a defense to an eviction, we can at least inform people of what their rights are, what they can expect, and just give them that knowledge and kind of agency over what's happening to them, because it's a very difficult, challenging, and can be a very confusing process if you've never been a part of it. Notices, like the notices that a landlord serves, are critically important to every eviction case. And so if your landlord gives you something, everyone should keep that, keep the envelopes that they come in. The best thing you can do is be organized and act quickly.
Thank you, John. As a follow-up to that, what are your thoughts, and anybody's welcome to pop in on this one, but what are some things that communities can do to somewhat prevent the wave of evictions? We know that there was, the stoppage during COVID for that, but how can we prevent it in the future?
Well, I think that's a really challenging question.
Yeah.
I think there are legislative solutions to problems that could maybe lower some of the barriers to moving. I think a lot of evictions happen because people get a notice and they just don't have the ability to relocate themselves, or they don't have anywhere to go. And so maybe lowering the threshold or the cost of moving to one place could be a possibility. But again, as everyone's said, maybe furthering education efforts to inform landlords of the positive aspects of accepting assistance, accepting vouchers, I think would also go a long ways.
Right. We did receive a question from the audience that is related to this very topic around subsidized rent, how sometimes there's a gap between the amount that the rent increases and of course their income isn't increasing. Are there any policies that help, or any resources that help fill in that gap where they're getting a certain amount of money to pay for the rent, but it's not quite enough to cover it?
Yeah, Waypoint, at least here in Lynn County, Cedar Rapids, is kind of the entry point of all of our rental assistance, and they are really the experts at knowing where help can be, plug in there. But one of the requirements of having a voucher is they have to routinely certify their income. So if there is a drop in the income, they should report that immediately, because HUD should, change their subsidy accordingly. And so I think all these things are so stressful. And I think that it's so easy for people to just try and push it aside and put it on the bottom of the pile instead of kind of being proactive. And so I think, the big thing is that they need to communicate with their workers and let them know if there's a change in circumstance.
And we're talking about, that kind of communication. And then you add in, as I mentioned earlier, intersectionality. If somebody is neurodiverse, and picking up the phone to call somebody is incredibly challenging. It's a frustrating piece, because you can only help people if they're asking, you can't read their minds, but, how do we, fill that gap of folks who find it really, really hard to ask for help, or just due to some neurodiversity, aren't able to do that. What are your thoughts on potential pieces for that? Not an easy question, I know.
Well, yeah, that is really challenging. I think, a lot of that comes down to the individual people in the offices and working these cases. And like's been mentioned, their caseloads are overwhelming, very large. And in a perfect world, there would be plenty of caseworkers who would be able to individualize the contact with each person, because as we talked about, a lot of people with vouchers are elderly and or disabled. And so, I don't know if no one on the outside the panel knows this, but I had a hard time getting my Zoom background to work today, and so as technology grows and a lot of these applications and things are done on smartphones, that's a really difficult barrier for people. And so I think it's important to kind of meet people where they're at.
Right.
Well, and working with the disabled, some of them may not even have the technology, and depending on where they are, if they're out in the rural communities, even saying, oh, we'll go to the public library, that may not even be an option.
Yeah, it's such a good point, because you're looking at broadband access in rural communities. There's definitely some issues with that, and then access, to get online, to find the resources to help mitigate these problems. I mean, there's so many pieces that go along the way. Carrie, I have a question kind of related. What are some steps, some actions that we can take to work towards enough quality housing options for different households at different income levels?
I think I've sort of touched on a couple of the things that I see. I think, this is the housing affordability, the gap in affordable housing is a multifaceted issue. So there is not going to be one solution. There is going to be an ongoing continuum of solutions. But some of the things that I personally think could make an impact are some communities are really reassessing what they're doing from a building code and zoning ordinance standpoint. We all want our communities to look nice, but some communities have taken that to the level at which it is impossible to build any housing at an affordable price point for really requirements that are aesthetic and not health and safety related, and also take away from the consumer's choice. If the ordinance says that no garages can face the street, they all need to be rear loading, that's an extra long driveway that costs a lot of money, and maybe that potential homeowner or renter would have preferred to pay less mortgage or a lower rent or had more square footage versus paying for a longer driveway. So just being aware that the policies that we put into place that are well-intentioned might have negative consequences with regard to housing affordability, and just trying to find that balance. And communities have started to talk about that. I mentioned the community land trust conversation. I think that really could make a difference, again, in maintaining housing affordability and perpetuity, both on the home ownership side and on the rental side. And then I think that we can never lose sight of the fact that we have to continue, as John mentioned, this extremely slow growth and availability of vouchers. And we've talked a lot about the unusability of vouchers. We need to address that problem, because there are always going to be, regardless of what we do to increase the housing supply and to make the housing stock in general more affordable to the population across the spectrum, we're always going to have to support people who are in the very low income bracket. The market cannot possibly meet the needs of, especially renters who are at below 30% of area median income. So we have to expand voucher availability. We have to understand that we as a community, as a society, have to support people who are in a very low income bracket so that they can achieve housing stability. So expanding those programs.
Thank you. John or Denise, feel free to pop in on that one. It's a hard, challenging, complex question.
It is. And I don't know that we can totally rely on state and county and federal funds. I mean, it just popped into my head this morning, employers. I mean, part of your employee wellness program, are you helping those employees that are struggling? You're wanting to keep them, you don't want them to leave the area. What are you doing to help them maintain stability, in their homes? So if it's a renter who has fallen behind, maybe they just need, a little boost. What can you do to help? Do we need to set up other communities, whether it's faith communities, donating into, like here in Cedar Rapids, we have the Cedar Rapids Greater Foundation. Do we need to set up a grant program with, through there where people can access, some assistance? I don't know that we can just continue to just totally rely on state and federal funds.
John, any thoughts on this as well around ensuring quality housing, across the board?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can say it any better than Carrie and Denise, but one issue that kind of goes along with all this is, I think, removing the stigma that comes with people having a difficult time. I think there's this common conception among many people that if you've faced an eviction or if you're having trouble, you must have done something wrong. And I just don't think that's what I see. And I don't think that reflects reality. And I think, as soon as the quicker that stigma, I think, gets addressed and confronted, I think with that, people will feel more comfortable coming forward and asking for help, making those phone calls.
That's such a good point.
John, that's so true. I mean, personalizing it, how many of us really have 6 to 12 months of emergency funds just set aside? I live in a 2-income household. If my household were to lose one of those incomes, I might be stable today. I would not be stable in that situation. I would be scrambling, and many, many people are in that situation. I think Denise was talking about it earlier. Maybe both of you, most of us are one dire medical emergency or disaster away from housing instability. So, personalizing that story so that everyone understands we're done, to your point of taking away the stigma, we're all in this together.
That's such a good point too, Carrie. I know I certainly don't have 6 to 12 months in savings. I mean, I would love to say that I do. I'm a single household with, a kid. And if I were to go without my salary, I would really be scrambling. But I do have the privilege of knowing where to go. I have the education. I know who to ask for help. I know where to find the resources. And so I have that privilege in order to find that help. Not everybody, and to your point too, John, a lot of times we do victim blaming in a way around eviction. Like, you must have done something really wrong and you probably deserve that because you weren't prepared. I'm guessing the majority of us are along that same ride. If we just had that bump, we don't have that cushion. And so I love that too, John, about personalizing, humanizing it. I would like to also ask, about if you have seen other cities or communities or states doing any programming or best practices around managing housing needs for those changing and growing populations, because we do have differences of folks who are moving and living here. Are you familiar with any other communities that you're like, oh, that's not a bad idea, we might want to talk about that, not cookie cutter it, but what are some resources or other communities that you are thinking might be a good one to look at more deeply?
To Denise's point that we really can't rely on state and federal aid to, fully close the gap here, there are several areas in the country where private investors are seeing that this is a really important issue. There are, I know that there's one I think in Charlotte, there is another in Minnesota. There are private investment funds where the return is maybe lower. Investors are accepting something like an 8% return instead of a 13 or 14% return in exchange for investing into, let's say, some of these programs are naturally occurring affordable housing that's at risk of being purchased as a value add property and all of the residents displaced, so that things can be done to that property to make it a high-end luxury property. So these investment groups are coming in and buying those properties and then guaranteeing affordability for a certain period. So I think there are lots of creative solutions if we just keep our ears to the ground and our eyes opened and learn from what our neighbors across the country are doing. We can certainly find some things that work and some things that don't work and hopefully replicate them here.
Well, in Madison, they set up a tiny home community to help with their homeless population. So that's going to take a lot of code change, to set up something like that. And again, getting that to be accepted in the community. Where would you put that in your community where it's going to be accepted? Because unfortunately, we always hear, well, I don't want that in my neighborhood.
Right, the NIMBY, not in my backyard.
It's a great idea, but not right here. Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Over there. Yes,
right.
Absolutely. So to kind of wrap up for this day that went so fast, if there's one thing that you hope that people in the audience would do, an action step or something that they can do individually as an organization, what can they do today as a result of our conversation? What might that look like? John, I'll start with you.
Well, I think a common theme that we've talked about is just to educate yourself on what the reality is in your community, what people are facing, and what resources are available, because the need may not match the resources available. And if that's the case, if you're in a position to advocate for more help, I think that would be a very positive step.
Thank you, John. Denise.
I think more private sector step up, and in investing in the communities.
I'll build on John's advocate, listen, communicate, seek to understand, and then advocate.
And I think part of that too goes back to the education. If we're doing advocacy, what does that look like? What is the messaging? What are the strategies? That's a whole nother session about advocacy or talking with our legislators. Well, it looks like we are wrapping up time already, so that goes so fast. I'd like to thank each one of you for sharing your expertise and your passion, not only sharing it, but also the work that you do. I know it's incredibly challenging to see people in challenging situations on a day-to-day basis. So I'm thankful for each of you and your organizations for what you do. So thank you. And thank you to the audience as well for attending. We appreciate you coming and spending time with us this morning to talk about housing access for all.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.